What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another lesson. Today we continue research. Today we dive into practice. We want to show you different researches, like how it looks like literally in practice. So how to explore, because we don't want to run in circles. We don't want to explore different rabbit holes. And for that, we need to know some tricks. So expect different cool ways to use Midjourney. It might be something you're already familiar with, but either way, it's a short and sweet lesson which has everything in one place. Let's go then. Now, we are on the web version of Midjourney. I think it's way better than the Discord one, which is so 2024. We start as any other research with a question, or rather a prompt in this case. So we can use something really basic, some keywords that we come across during our Google research. And in our case, it's as simple as street level view of ancient Kathmandu. And while it's generating images, I think something worth pointing out is that you can choose different aspects. You will get different results whether you go with square, landscape, or portrait. I will run the 16:9 and boom, we get a couple of square and a couple of landscape results. We can see that the square ones are mostly from a human perspective and it's like a common theme here. But in landscape, we get one odd result, which is the mid-aerial. And that's kind of interesting. If you run more and more tests, if you feel stuck, just try different aspect ratios, That can give you different compositions, different spatial ideas, which we talked about in the previous lesson. Changing aspect ratio can give totally different results without changing the prompt. So yeah, definitely take advantage of that if you feel stuck. But another thing worth noting is the styling parameter. If you lower it down, it kind of makes the image closer to the prompt. But at the same time, it should be less aesthetically pleasing in the way Midjourney understands aesthetics. So setting the style value to 0 allows you to break from typical compositions, just as with the aspects. And yeah, it allows you to break from the same color palettes composition, which, you might be getting in the normal situation. And according to Midjourney, this set is aesthetically less pleasing, but I don't know, I wouldn't agree with that. And I think we are getting really cool spatial ideas and more unique color palettes in return. So yeah, it's a valid tool when you feel like you're running in circles. But anyway, let's set stylize to default and continue with landscape. This time I will expand my prompt. So I will go with street level view of ancient desert town, the style of Silk Road, Kathmandu merchants and monks. So yeah, we add other elements like the Silk Road and some entourage elements. And we'll show you a trick to expand on our prompts a bit later. Prompts are obviously the most powerful tool for research, but let me show you some other tricks before. We have another batch of references, and I kind of like having those shops in a desert, I like the busyness of the second image.
The general vibe is there, perhaps some smaller motifs as well. But the biggest problem is that the composition and the spatial ideas are pretty simple.
So let's say I want to go in that direction. And I can do a couple of things here. First, let's zoom out. We can expand the view upwards. Bam! So now we are switching back to the square aspect again. And what's cool about it, it's not about the street anymore. Now we explore the bigger context. Now we explore the building facades, a connection between them. It definitely gives us a lot of additional information that may work or not, and we keep searching, Expanding is one way to investigate, but even more powerful is seeing variations. So those can be either subtle or strong. With subtle variations, we can stay within the same composition, only smaller details will change, but the stronger variations are more interesting. We might find something more intriguing here. So yeah, you can see the subtle variants. It's more or less the same, but it might be useful when you're looking for some smaller motifs. However, with the stronger variations, we see that the geometry of the street changes. And it feels like we are literally walking there. We are like continuously discovering new things. We remain in the same reality, but we get additional context to it. So, it's just mind-blowing. It feels like you're just literally walking there. Anyway, moving on. Next up, another way of exploring / research in Midjourney is using remix. And remix works similarly to vary, but it allows us to modify the prompt. It's incredibly fun and powerful as well. We can take this image, we can change the prompt, And we can even change the stylize, raw, like anything at this point. So let's say I would like to have some gold to appear on these buildings. I will add gold covered buildings to the prompt and see what happens. And yeah, like as you can see, it's more or less visible. It's kind of insane that it works, but yeah, it works. We have the same reality, but we changed one thing, and it's exactly what we wanted. So Remix is incredibly powerful, so we encourage you to play around with it. You can investigate smaller changes, you can change composition, lots to do here. So yeah, this feature alone makes the research process so much more organic. Remix, vary, variations, those are your tools to go deeper when you have that initial direction set in. Now back to prompts. Obviously, prompts are very important. They are super duper powerful. And I think there's always a way to articulate what you are looking for. But I don't know, maybe that sentence, that prompt, it's something that is difficult to articulate, especially for someone that's like not a native speaker. And my wife always tells me that I'm having like a huge trouble putting a cohesive sentence together. Like this thing is already scripted, so that's a completely different story. But yeah, anyway, if you have a difficult time articulating your thoughts, or I don't know, when your brain power is running low, you can use another cool feature, which is describe. If you're using Midjourney on Discord, you just type /describe and upload an image. However, in the web version, it's a little bit better. And let me show you. You can just upload an image, click on the eye icon here, and then we get tons of descriptors. We get those keywords, subjects, and we can use those in our prompts. So we can educate ourselves how to articulate things that we were looking for before. Simply by clicking on certain things, we can build a prompt, and it's pretty insane if you ask me. So we get a set of images, and as you can see, they are pretty close to our initial reference. So that means that the descriptors worked, and they worked pretty cool. So from this point on, you can expand, remix, vary, change aspects, prompts, anything that you like. This should be the end of the lesson, but I think we can give a special shout out to one additional feature in Midjourney. It can be quite useful, but it's definitely more on the experimental side of things. So it's called blend, and it just blends stuff together, it combines them. We can upload an image and let Midjourney know what's inside. We can tell him that it's either a character or is it a style reference. We can also tell him that this image is essentially a prompt, which is also kind of nice. So if we upload multiple images and set them as image prompts, Midjourney will kind of analyze them compositionally, color-wise, and try to combine them together. It's definitely something completely fresh, something we didn't have before as a research tool, and you definitely need to approach it with an open mind. So yeah, that's the last thing. That's about it for today. I hope you see that there's many different ways to explore, like you can have prompts to get you started, and then you can take it from there. You can always investigate. Cool. In the next lesson, we tackle even more research, but more on the experimental stuff. I bet you haven't seen that one. Thanks, and see you there.